Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. You know how some people say they just fall into their careers? That wasn't me. I clawed my way into mine with ambition, coffee, and late nights in a downtown apartment that smelled like ambition and burnt toast. By the time I landed a job at Novascore, a name you'd recognize if you've ever read a finance magazine or accidentally clicked the wrong tab on LinkedIn, I thought I'd made it. Not just made it like got a salary and a desk made it. I mean, I made it into a company people whispered about at networking events. The kind with keycards, kombucha on tap, and corporate jargon that would make a philosophy major cry. I was 29 then, a senior analyst on the strategic intelligence team. My brain was my asset, my voice my tool. I didn't code. I didn't crunch KPIs for fun. I thought, I synthesized, I strategized. It was the kind of work where you couldn't Google your way through a bad day. You had to think your way out of it. And that's what they paid us for. To think. Not just follow templates or mimic playbooks. We were the last bastion of what they like to call organic intellectual capital. At least, that's what the SVP said during our last retreat in Aspen. I didn't really buy into all that corporate poetry, but I believed in the work. We took monthly courses, agile management, advanced strategic modeling, the occasional AI trend module, but honestly, none of it ever changed what I actually did. Most of my job still came down to one thing: gut. I knew when a market was about to pivot, when a partner was bluffing, when a campaign was all surface and no depth. You can't automate that. I remember thinking, half-jokingly, during one of our innovation roundtables, that no amount of artificial intelligence could outthink someone who'd spent 10 years learning how people actually behave. But then, Dylan happened. Dylan, the new CEO, fresh from some disrupt-everything startup in Berlin. He walked in with the swagger of someone who thought spreadsheets were an outdated concept and every problem could be solved with the right algorithm. He was charming in a performative kind of way. His suits were tailored, his smile was curated, and his vision? Oh, his vision made me uneasy from day one. He wanted progress. Fast, loud, and unrelenting. Our first all-hands meeting with him was filled with all the usual buzzwords: transformation, agility, frictionless integration, vertical growth. You could almost hear the old guard choking on their lattes. I just took notes. I'd been through new leadership before. You don't panic. You watch. You adapt. Except this time, adaptation didn't seem to be on the table. A week later, he dropped the bomb. We were all gathered in the panoramic conference room. Sleek glass walls, skyline views, the works. The air felt tight. I remember the way the intern next to me kept tugging at her blazer sleeve, like she could sense the shift before it landed. Then Dylan stepped forward, no notes, no hesitation, and said the line that burned itself into my memory. Anyone who does not know how to use artificial intelligence is fired, effective immediately. We only need progressive people. Silence. Complete, hollow silence. I thought it was a joke, a really bad one. But HR didn't laugh. They started handing out folders. The room went from sleek professionalism to stunned chaos in under 10 minutes. My hands were shaking. I flipped open the folder on my lap, and there it was. My name, my department, and the words, "Offboarding packet." No warning, no evaluation, just done. Because I wasn't AI fluent. I looked around at faces I knew, brilliant minds, team leads, innovators, and watched them pack up like criminals being escorted out. And I realized something then. It wasn't just a layoff, it was a purge, of age, of method, of memory. He didn't want a team, he wanted a machine, and people like me? We were legacy software. So I stood up. I didn't say a word. Just gathered my things, walked past the HR director who couldn't meet my eyes, and left. But here's the thing Dylan didn't know. I might have walked out quietly, but I was never going to stay gone. The hallway was a mess of half-packed bags and whispered outrage. No one spoke above a murmur. It was like we all thought loud voices would make it worse. Some people cried. Some just sat there, stunned, folders still unopened in their laps. Me? I walked. Straight to my desk, packed up the bare minimum, and stood by the elevators like I was waiting for sense to return to the building. But it didn't. Not yet. Tina found me there. She looked pale, like someone had just unplugged her from her own life. "We're going upstairs," she said. Her voice was tight, low. "To Sloan." Sloan, the founder. The real power behind the company, though he'd stepped back years ago and left the day-to-day to his hand-picked CEOs. But Dylan wasn't hand-picked. Dylan was parachuted in by a board that wanted disruption. We marched upstairs as a group, maybe 20 of us. Department heads, project leads, senior staff, the ones who'd built Novascore before Dylan ever knew our name. The executive floor was too quiet, too clean. Sloane's assistant blinked when she saw us, but she didn't try to stop us. Maybe she knew. Maybe she'd been expecting this. Sloan met us in his private conference room. Oak walls, brass trim. No AI generated anything in sight. Just a man in his 60s with piercing eyes and a voice that still carried weight, even if it was softer now. "What's this about?" he asked, folding his hands. Tina stepped forward. "Dylan just told half the company to resign unless they're AI fluent." Sloan didn't flinch, but something shifted in his jaw. "And?" he said. I spoke next. "We're not afraid of new tools, but you can't replace judgment, experience, trust." He said anyone who doesn't know how to use artificial intelligence is obsolete, someone else added. "Effective immediately." Sloan leaned back in his chair. Silence. Then, "Fine," he said. We blinked. "Fine?" I echoed. "I'll speak to Dylan. But if this company is moving toward integration, you'll prove whether you belong in that future. You'll take a test." "A test?" someone repeated. Sloan nodded. "A test on AI. Usage, theory, integration. Everyone, no exceptions." Everyone. We exchanged glances, confused, reluctant. But what could we do? It was that, or accept Dylan's decree like obedient relics. The test was the next day. An online platform, timed, 50 questions, practical simulations, theory, application. I recognized some of it: prompt structures, AI ethics, generative design tools. But some? Pure jargon, slippery tricks. Questions designed to trip you up if you hadn't spent the last year worshipping at the altar of artificial intelligence. When the timer hit 0, I felt like someone had squeezed the air from my lungs. Results were announced at the next all hands. We were packed into the main atrium, eyes glued to the monitor behind Dylan, who stood at the podium like he was announcing lottery winners. "Thank you for participating in our strategic alignment initiative," he began. "We're in a time of transformation. Those who rise to the challenge will lead us forward." Then came the results. They scrolled across the screen, red for fail, green for pass, names blinking like warning lights. Most of them were red, including mine. I stared at the screen. I had failed. So had Tina. So had Javier from Data Strategy. So had nearly every person I respected in that room. And then the list ended. No score for Ben, the new SEO. The one who'd been whispering about optimizing out the old guard. No pass, no fail, just blank. I felt my stomach drop. The silence was heavy, waiting for someone to say it. I raised my hand. "Where's Ben's result?" Dylan's smile flickered. "Ben's already certified in AI systems. He's exempt." A murmur rippled through the room. "Of course he is," someone muttered. "Then why did the rest of us have to take it?" I asked, voice steady but sharp. Dylan gave that politician's smile, all teeth and no truth. "Because we need to know who's ready to evolve." But what I heard was, "Because we needed an excuse to cut you." And in that moment, I realized something chilling. This wasn't about AI. Not really. It was about control. And Dylan Mercer had just picked the wrong battlefield. The air in the office changed overnight. It wasn't just tense. It was hostile, like the walls themselves were listening. Like the coffee machine could report your conversations. That screen, the one that had flashed red and green like some twisted talent show, became the unofficial start of the purge. One by one, people were called into performance review meetings. No one came back from those. Tina was first. I watched her walk into the small glass meeting room outside HR with her head held high and a quiet fury in her eyes. 27 minutes later, she walked out with a blank expression and a box of her things. She didn't even look at me, just kept walking, like if she stopped, she'd crumble. I followed her to the elevator. "They said I failed the test," she whispered, voice trembling. "You didn't," I said. "You knew more than most." "They didn't even show me the results." That hit me like a punch to the stomach. I should have said something. I should have demanded to see her score. But I already knew what the answer would be. Dylan wasn't building a team. He was clearing a path. And people like Tina, competent, principled, older than 35, were obstacles, not assets. By Friday, 9 more people were gone. Most of them from departments that didn't revolve around automation or code, strategy, client relations. Even HR wasn't safe. Kavita, the only one who ever stood up for our team, was let go due to restructuring. No one said the word fired, but everyone knew. The test was never about AI. It was a weapon, a justification, a way to erase history under the guise of innovation. And still, we stayed. Those of us who hadn't been called in yet. We stayed because we were scared, yes, but also because we hoped. Hoped someone would stop this, that Sloan would step in, that the board would notice, that someone, somewhere would say, "This isn't right." But silence is the loudest answer you can get in a place like this. Ben, meanwhile, walked the halls like he already owned them. He started holding briefings for the remaining staff, training modules, optimization clinics, all buzzword soup with zero flavor. But people sat through them anyway, afraid to be seen as resistant. Every time he mentioned AI, his eyes landed on me, like he was daring me to object, like he wanted a scene. I didn't give him one, not yet. But I listened, carefully, because hidden beneath all the faux enthusiasm and algorithm worship was something darker. Dylan was building something, not just a team, an empire, a new hierarchy where loyalty to the old company meant nothing, and people like Ben were the new nobility, where tools replaced trust and obedience replaced insight. We weren't employees anymore. We were liabilities, an unwanted reminder of a time before the cult of artificial intelligence. And I knew one thing for sure. We wouldn't get justice. Not here. Not from them. If we wanted truth to matter again, we'd have to make it matter. There's a certain kind of silence that only follows betrayal. Not the loud kind, the kind that sinks in slowly, like fog filling a valley. That's what our office became after the test results and the firings, a graveyard of murmured disbelief and uneasy stares. People didn't leave in waves. They left like snowflakes falling off a melting ledge, one at a time, quietly, almost apologetically. First, it was Sasha from Client Analytics. She'd been at Novascore for 6 years and was one of those rare people who could make a pivot table sing. The day after she cleared her desk, I found a half-finished coffee cup still sitting on her keyboard, as if she'd expected to come back. As if part of her still hoped this was all just a nightmare we'd wake from. Next was Javier from Market Ops. Brilliant, intuitive, sharp as glass. He left a note on his whiteboard before he went. Sometimes walking away is the smartest play. And it wasn't just the older crowd anymore. Even a few of the younger hires began to vanish. Those who dared to ask the wrong questions or showed too much loyalty to the wrong colleagues. At first, I told myself it was the market, or fear, or maybe just self-preservation. But then the stories started trickling back. Sasha called me late one night, her voice shaking. "Diana, something's wrong." She'd landed a role at a data firm in Boston, signed the offer, cleared HR. Everything was set. Then, 2 days before her start date, she got a call. Her new boss, someone she'd spoken with 3 times already, sounded cold, mechanical. He told her there had been a change in direction, that something had come up in her references, something about difficulty adapting to emerging systems. No specifics, just a shadow, a whisper. And then he hung up. "I know that wasn't from my references," Sasha said, her voice cracking. "That language, emerging systems, that's how he talks. That's Ben." I froze. Javier messaged me a week later with something even worse. His new job had gone radio silent. When he finally reached someone in HR, they said his profile had been flagged as potentially incompatible with agile transformation goals. Again, no details, just bureaucratic poison. And then I started to notice a pattern. Ben, who walked the halls with the smugness of someone who thought policy only applied to other people. Ben, who had installed himself in every AI integration council and innovation task force Dylan had cooked up in his first month. Ben, who spoke of colleagues in terms of value thresholds and evolution metrics. Ben, who had no test score listed. Ben, who had built his role not on results, but on proximity, to power, to Dylan, to whatever Silicon Valley fairy dust he thought would keep him invincible. The pieces clicked together like teeth. He was sabotaging people, sending anonymous notes, whispering doubts during reference calls, crafting just enough innuendo to make someone hesitate. He was blacklisting those who dared to leave and those who had been pushed out. It was more than petty. It was dangerous. I didn't know how far it went, but I knew one thing. We couldn't fight what we didn't understand, and we definitely couldn't wait for Dylan to see it. He was too busy building his empire. And Ben? He was already casting shadows across the land. That's when I made the call. Jared from IT had always been discreet. Years ago, I helped him out of a tight spot, flagged a faulty vendor license before it could spiral into legal drama. He owed me. And he remembered. We met in the parking garage. Level B2. Quiet. Empty. The hum of fluorescent lights above us like a bad omen. He handed me a flash drive. "You didn't get this from me," he said. "Check the onboarding file, especially the redacted pages." I drove home that night with the radio off, hands tight on the steering wheel. Back in my apartment, I plugged in the drive. Ben's resume? Flawless. Too flawless. But the internal notes? They told another story. 2 previous jobs with undisclosed transitions. One consultancy that shut down shortly after he completed his strategic optimization. A project labeled internal breach with no details, just a flagged note from a senior compliance officer. Subject removed from sensitive datasets after breach of protocol. Recommendation withheld. Buried. Obscured. But real. This was the man who was branding the rest of us obsolete. This was the man Dylan was using as his right hand. I sat there in the dark, the only light coming from my laptop screen, and felt something cold and electric begin to unfurl in my chest. Ben thought he was untouchable. Dylan thought he was indispensable. They both forgot something. I don't lose wars. I just wait for the right battlefield. And this? This was the opening volley. The deeper I dug, the stranger it got. After finding the internal flags on Ben's onboarding file, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still missing something. A pattern. A bigger piece of the puzzle. So I did what any analyst worth her salt would do. I followed the data. The shell company listed on his resume? I traced it. Took me half a night and 3 VPN reroutes, but I found it. It was called Stratiform Dynamics. Sounded official. Had a slick website, now archived, and a portfolio that looked impressive at first glance. But the second I ran the registered name through corporate filings, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Stratiform Dynamics had gone bankrupt 2 years ago. Quietly. No headlines. No drama. But the paperwork was damning. Ben had been their director of SEO and digital strategy. He'd led a massive automation overhaul, outsourcing content, replacing teams with AI tools, promising maximum growth with minimal cost. And for a few quarters, the numbers looked great. Until they didn't. The AI systems failed under real-world conditions. Engagement plummeted, SEO rankings tanked, clients started pulling out. The company bled money until it collapsed under the weight of its own inflated metrics. Ben was quietly let go a month before they filed for Chapter 11. No lawsuit, no press release. Just an NDA and a golden parachute to make the problem disappear. And now he was here, in our office, repeating the exact same strategy. Except this time, he'd learned to work from the shadows. No direct decisions, just influence. Suggestions. Subtle nudges in Dylan's ear while he made himself the poster boy for innovation. It wasn't just gross. It was dangerous. We weren't heading for evolution. We were heading for collapse. I stared at the screen, A dozen browser tabs open, evidence in every direction, and felt a slow fury settle into my bones. They weren't just purging loyal employees. They were handing the future of the company to a man with a proven history of destruction. And the worst part? No one at the top knew. At least, I hoped they didn't. Because if Sloan or the board had seen this history and let it slide, if Dylan had known and still brought Ben in, then we weren't just dealing with arrogance. We were dealing with rot. I didn't sleep that night. At 6:12 a.m., I sent Tina a secure message, encrypted, no names, just one line. "We need to talk, urgent, found something about Ben." She replied 6 minutes later, "Come to my place, bring everything." That afternoon, over a kitchen table covered in printouts and flash drives, we pieced it together. Ben's ghost company, the failed overhaul, the quiet firing. The timeline was airtight, the receipts undeniable, and we made a decision. We were going to Sloan, not Dylan, not HR, not innovation leadership, straight to the top, to the man who'd built this company with his own 2 hands. Because this wasn't just about office politics anymore. This was about saving Novascore from the same slow bleed that had already killed one company. We just had to hope the man upstairs still cared enough to stop it. We had everything: screenshots, timelines, records of Stratiform Dynamics implosion, internal flags from Ben's last job. The evidence was as real as it gets. But as I sat across from Tina at her kitchen table, both of us pale from lack of sleep and too much coffee, something nagged at me. "This still might not be enough," I said, scrolling through the last of the bankruptcy files. Tina looked up. "Are you serious?" "Think about it. Sloan's not stupid, but he's cautious. He won't move on suspicion alone, not unless it's hurting his bottom line." She sighed and leaned back in her chair. "Then we wait. He'll feel it soon enough." It didn't take long. That Thursday, I got a ping from Kai in logistics. One line, frantic. "Have you seen the Fulcrum order file? Something's wrong." My heart skipped. Fulcrum, a legacy client, high maintenance, demanding. The kind of account that couldn't be managed with dashboards and chatbots. For years, Sasha and her team had handled them manually, every invoice checked twice, every request routed through human eyes. Not because it was inefficient, but because the client insisted on nuance. They didn't trust automation. They trusted people. And now, those people were gone. I jumped onto our shared drive. The Fulcrum folder was a mess. Files misnamed. Delivery dates misaligned. 3 invoices sent twice. 1 completely missing. And worst of all, the most recent spec change request, clearly labeled as Urgent Final Revision in red, bold, all caps, had been routed into a low-priority folder by our AI triage tool. Completely ignored. The deadline had passed that morning. By 3 p.m., Fulcrum's VP of Operations was on a call with Dylan, and he was livid. I wasn't in the room, but I didn't need to be. The fallout spread fast. Everyone heard the shouting through the walls. By 3:45, the client had sent a formal notice. "Unless our concerns are addressed by end of business today, we will begin dissolving our partnership, effective immediately." There it was. The first crack. No AI, no Ben. No predictive dashboard could fix what had just happened, because no one left in the building knew how to fix it. I watched the panic ripple through Slack. Can someone find the revision spec? Do we have a backup? Who handled this before? No one answered, because Sasha had, and Sasha was gone, because of a test she never failed. That's when Sloan emerged from his office. He didn't say a word, just walked the floor, slowly, taking in the chaos. Dylan was at his side, sweat beading just beneath his designer collar. I stepped into Sloan's path. "Sir," I said calmly, "I have something you need to see. It's about Ben, and it explains everything." He looked at me. Not past me, not through me, at me. The way only someone who still remembers the weight of truth can. "Come to my office," he said. And just like that, the game changed, because Dylan had built his empire on illusion. But now, the cracks were starting to show. And the truth? It was coming. We didn't run to Sloan's office. We walked, calm, composed. But every step down that hallway felt heavier than the last. I could feel Tina's energy beside me, tense like a spring pulled too tight. We both knew this was our shot. Maybe our last one. We had the flash drive. We had the files. We had a story that shouldn't need embellishment, just evidence and a little integrity. The office was as pristine as always. Heavy oak, deep burgundy leather, glass cases filled with trophies, and plaques from a more honorable era. A time when people stayed at Novascore for decades, not quarters. Sloan stood when we entered. Briefly. He didn't offer a handshake, but he nodded. You said it was urgent. It is, I said, meeting his gaze. And you'll want to see this. We plugged in the drive and walked him through everything. The failed company, stratiform dynamics, the AI that replaced too many hands and cost too many contracts, the internal termination notes, redacted but real, the bankruptcy that followed less than a year later. Ben's fingerprints were on all of it. And then we showed the sabotage, dozens of former employees with identical stories, anonymous recommendations, withdrawn offers, careers derailed by whispers from someone with no stake in their success. He's doing it again, Tina said. Only this time, we're next. I added the final piece, the fulcrum disaster, the order that slipped through AI filters, the urgent change request that got buried in automation logic and misfiled, the client's formal threat to walk away. He built his last empire on automation, I said quietly. It didn't survive. And now we're letting him build another one, Tina added. Right here. We waited. Sloan stared at the screen, his fingers steepled in front of his mouth, his eyes unreadable. A long pause stretched between us, thick and oppressive, the kind that made seconds feel like hours. Then, without looking at us, he spoke. Thank you. That will be all. I blinked. Sir? He didn't repeat himself, just gestured slightly toward the door, still not meeting our eyes. It took me a moment to understand. He had heard us, absorbed every word, but he was choosing silence. Not because he doubted us, because he'd already made his decision. He wasn't going to stop Dylan. He wasn't going to stop Ben. He wasn't going to do anything. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, just a soft, final snap. The last thread of faith. We walked out in silence. Tina looked like she'd been punched. I didn't ask her what she was thinking. I already knew. We'd come armed with truth, with receipts, with a chance to change the trajectory of this place. But Sloan didn't want change. He wanted peace, even if it was built on rot. In the elevator, I stared at the mirrored walls, at the reflection of a woman who once believed loyalty could still mean something. I didn't recognize her anymore. When the doors opened onto the lobby, I barely noticed the polished floors, the curated scent of synthetic cedar and ambition. We were halfway across the marble when the voice stopped us. Well, Ben. Standing near the glass wall, one foot crossed casually over the other, like a villain in a startup-themed movie. Arms folded. That smug, calculated smirk plastered across his face. You forget something? He asked, cocking his head. Or did the legacy squad just need one last lap for old time's sake? Tina stiffened. I didn't move. I just looked at him. There was a kind of calm that comes after devastation, that eerie clarity when you realize the fire's already burned everything, and now it's just ash. You should smile while you still can, I said. He laughed. That's cute. You think I'm worried about dinosaurs with memory sticks. He stepped forward. Here's the thing you don't get, Diana. This company isn't about people anymore. It's about systems. Efficient, obedient, optimized systems. You represent friction, resistance, sentiment. His grin sharpened. You were obsolete before you even realized the game changed. He turned to walk away, but then looked back over his shoulder. Enjoy your afternoon. Try not to trip over the future on your way out. The glass door slid open. He disappeared into the atrium. Tina stared after him, stunned. I didn't follow him with my eyes, because I wasn't looking at the door behind me. I was looking at the road ahead. Sloan had shown me something more valuable than support. He showed me the rules, and now it was time to stop playing by them. The headlines hit before the sun did. I was sitting at my kitchen table, still in pajamas, staring at a blank Word doc like it held some hidden answer I hadn't found yet. Then my phone buzzed, once, twice. Then a cascade of chimes and alerts so relentless, I thought something personal had happened, but it wasn't personal. It was everywhere. Artificial intelligence scandal at Novascore, mass firings tied to illegal restructuring strategy. Insiders reveal CEO's plan to replace staff with AI systems. The human cost of innovation. Former employees speak out. I clicked the first link, and the world tilted. There, in black and white, were snippets from internal documents, redacted just enough to protect sources, but clear enough to damn the company. Phrases I recognized, emails I'd seen, words like legacy cleansing and manual redundancy replacement. Then came the leaked Slack messages. I saw Ben's handle on half of them. Need to start sunsetting the holdouts. Priority is anyone over 35. Slow walk them out with testing metrics. D doesn't want noise, just action. Keep HR out of it until it's clean. My stomach turned. I refreshed the page and another article popped up. Then another. Tech blogs, financial sites. Even one major network had picked it up. Within 2 hours, the scandal was a front-page feature in the digital edition of the Wall Street Daily. The term AI purge was trending across platforms. The backlash was swift, brutal, and strangely beautiful. Public reaction split in two, half horrified by the manipulation, half terrified of what it meant for the future of work. But everyone agreed on one thing. Novascore had gone too far. And now, they were bleeding for it. By 8:30 a.m., the company's LinkedIn account turned off comments. By 9 a.m., their Twitter was locked. By 9:15 a.m., the stock had dropped 7%. And by 9:42 a.m., my phone rang. Caller ID, Novascore HR. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up. The voice was stiff, formal. Not the usual recruiter tone. This was damage control in a blouse. Miss Eldridge, we're reaching out to offer a reinstatement package. You would return to your previous role at previous compensation with no impact to your benefits. Back pay will be issued immediately upon agreement. I sat in silence. Miss Eldridge? I finally answered. And the others? She hesitated. We're contacting everyone affected. We hope to restore stability and trust. Trust. That word had the audacity to appear in her sentence like it hadn't been completely torched. Is Dylan Mercer making these calls personally? I asked. Another pause. No, ma'am. Executive outreach is not part of this initiative. Of course not. Dylan didn't do apologies. He didn't even do consequences, not for himself. The man who tore through the soul of a company in pursuit of automation couldn't even pick up a phone. He sent HR to play cleanup while he hid behind silence and PR drafts. I ended the call without saying yes or no. 10 minutes later, I got a text from Tina. They called, said they want us back, like nothing happened. You going? I stared at the screen. There it was, the choice. I could go back to my desk, my view of the skyline, my badge with the magnetic strip. I could pretend it had all been a detour, that it hadn't meant something, that it hadn't changed me, but it had. They weren't inviting us back because they respected us. They were calling because they'd been caught. They still didn't see our value. They just missed our labor. I typed back slowly. He didn't even call, couldn't even admit he was wrong. Tina replied with a single line. Because admitting it means he never should have let us go. And that was the truth. Sloan never intervened. Dylan never apologized. Ben never paid for what he did. But they had been exposed. They had been shamed. And suddenly, the people they'd written off, the thinkers, the writers, the strategists, the legacy team, we were the only ones who could stabilize the chaos. But they didn't deserve that from us. Not anymore. I stood up from my table, staring at the city outside my window. A city built on reinvention, on grit, on people like us. And I realized something. They wanted us to come back to fix what they broke. But maybe, just maybe, we were never meant to fix their system. Maybe we were meant to build our own. It didn't happen right away. After the scandal, after the headlines, after the scramble to restore what had been carelessly torn apart, life moved on. Slower, quieter. In some ways, it was better that way. Most of us didn't return to Novascore, not because we couldn't, but because we chose not to. The damage ran too deep. Trust wasn't something you could paste back together with paychecks and backdated contracts. Tina started consulting independently. Javier took that long-postponed sabbatical. Sasha opened her own analytics firm with 2 other former colleagues, and it was already being noticed by industry boards. As for me, I took some time to breathe, to think, to write. I didn't know what was next, only that it wouldn't look like what I left behind. Weeks passed, then months. And then, one gray afternoon, as I was sitting at the same kitchen table where this mess had begun, my phone rang. The number wasn't one I recognized immediately, but the name stopped me. Sloan Callahan. I let it ring twice before I answered. His voice was slower than I remembered, measured. There was no smugness, no boardroom polish. "Diana," he said, "I want to begin by saying, I was wrong." I didn't speak. I let him fill the silence. I should have stopped it sooner. I should have listened. But I didn't, and people got hurt. You saw what was coming when I refused to. There was something different in his tone, not just regret, remorse. Real and unvarnished. He continued, "Dylan is gone. The board asked for his resignation last week. Ben was terminated shortly after. No payout, no golden parachute. We traced the falsified recommendations. It's all documented now." Another pause. "I've asked HR to contact those affected, but you were right. That shouldn't come from them. It should come from me." I exhaled slowly. He went on. "You built this place, not just with your hands, with your mind, your team, your leadership, your values. We need that again. If you're willing to return, on your terms, I want to offer you the role of head of strategy and ethics, full autonomy, and a seat at the table this time." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I let the weight of everything rest on my shoulders. He had finally said what needed to be said, and not just to restore a career, but to restore the truth. When I answered, my voice was calm. "I'll come back," I said, "but only if we rebuild the right way. No more shortcuts, no more silence." "Understood," Sloan said. "We'll follow your lead." The first day back was surreal. People stared, whispered, but this time not with suspicion, with respect. I walked past the glass walls, past the conference rooms where people once dismissed us as obsolete, and into an office that bore my name in bold gold letters. Diana Eldridge, Head of Strategy and Ethics. There was no celebration, no grand speech, just work, real work. And this time, I wasn't alone. I brought Tina in as my advisor, rehired Sasha's team. Even Javier agreed to consult. We weren't returning to the old company. We were building the new one that remembered its people before its platforms, one that treated intelligence, real, human intelligence, as irreplaceable. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who had once been told she was outdated had just been asked to help lead the future, not because of artificial intelligence, but because of earned wisdom. And maybe that's the moral of it all. Innovation without empathy is just destruction in disguise. And when the dust settles, the ones who rebuild, they're the ones who never stop thinking,